Even in the deepest void of despair, there is a story that glows with the light of hope and redemption. Join us as we find the beauty in the darkness and the strength in the struggle. Click subscribe now and keep the glow alive with us.
The Hargrove Inn had the kind of entryway that made you feel like you'd arrived somewhere that mattered. Tall iron lanterns on either side of the door, amber lights spilling across the stone walkway. The sound of a piano playing something soft and elegant just beyond the glass. I could smell the gardenias from the floral arrangements even before we stepped inside. That thick, sweet scent that always made me think of my grandmother's kitchen. Sophie squeezed my hand and looked up at me with enormous eyes. She was 6 years old and wearing the dress we had picked out together the weekend before, a pale lavender with a white sash that tied in the back, the one she had called her princess party dress from the moment she saw it on the hanger. She had asked me 3 times on the drive over if she looked beautiful. I had told her 3 times that she looked like the most beautiful girl I had ever seen in my entire life. She had accepted this with the gracious seriousness of someone who is used to being right about things. "Mommy," she said, stopping just short of the door. "Do you think Uncle Ethan will notice my bow?" I looked down at the enormous white bow tied to her waist. There was no possible way a person with functioning eyes could miss it. "I think it might be the first thing he sees," I said. She considered this with great satisfaction and pulled open the heavy door herself. My mother was standing in the lobby. Not near the lobby, not passing through it. Standing in it, in a way that suggested she had been standing there waiting for exactly this moment. She was wearing her navy dress, the one she saved for occasions where she needed to feel in control, and when she saw us, her face did something that I recognized immediately. Not a smile exactly. The gathering of composure before a difficult conversation. "Rachel." Her eyes moved from me to my husband Daniel, then down to Sophie, then back to me. "I didn't realize you were bringing Sophie." "She was invited," I said. "Ethan told me specifically to bring her. He said Brooke wanted to meet her." My mother's expression shifted in a way I couldn't immediately name. "Yes, well, there's been a small change in the guest arrangements. Brooke's family is larger than they anticipated, and it's getting a bit crowded in the main room. So they've decided to keep it to just the core people tonight." Daniel put his hand on my lower back, not pushing me forward, not pulling me back, just there. "We are core people," I said. "Ethan is my brother." Of course he is." My mother's voice was smooth and careful in the way it got when she had already decided what the outcome of a conversation would be and was simply moving both parties toward it as efficiently as possible. "I just think tonight might be better if it were a little more contained. Brooke is nervous, you know how she gets, and she really wants everything to be—" "Grandma," Sophie said. My mother looked down at her. Sophie's face was completely open and guileless. Did I do something wrong? The lobby was not loud. There were 2 other guests near the check-in table, and the piano was playing something that drifted in from the next room, and the gardenias smelled very sweet. And the silence after Sophie's question had a weight to it that pressed against the back of my throat. "No, sweetheart," my mother said, crouching down. "Of course you didn't. Then why can't we come to the party?" My mother straightened up and looked at me, and something in her expression broke slightly at its seams before she reassembled it. "Brooke has a niece. Her sister's little girl, Penelope. She's 5, and she's going to be the flower girl at the wedding. Brooke felt that having 2 little girls in that role would be—" "Sophie was promised that role," I said. 4 months ago. Ethan called me. He asked me directly. "Rachel, plans change. She knows the song. She's been practicing the walk." I could hear the edge in my own voice, and I pulled it back deliberately the way I had been pulling things back my whole life in his family. Keeping my voice low and controlled, because raising it would mean I was the difficult one, because being hurt loudly was the same thing as being dramatic in this family, and being dramatic was the same thing as being wrong. "You could have called me before we drove 40 minutes, before Sophie put on her dress." My mother looked at me with an expression that was patient in the way a person is patient when they have already decided they are right. "I did try to reach you. I left a message." She had not left a message. I had checked my phone 4 times on the drive over. "I think it would be best," my mother said, "if you and Daniel headed home tonight, and we'll have everyone over for dinner next Sunday and it'll be lovely." Sophie looked up at me. She was not crying. She was not even close to crying, which was somehow worse. She was just looking at me with that careful, calibrated attention that children have when they are trying to read what the adults around them are feeling, because the adults are not saying it out loud. Okay, I said. It was the only word I had. I took Sophie's hand and turned around and walked back through the iron lantern doorway and down the stone steps and across the parking lot, and I did not look back at my mother standing in the lobby of the Hargrove Inn. I did not look back at the warm light or the gardenias or the piano that was still playing, unbothered, on the other side of the glass. Daniel walked beside me. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Sophie was quiet until we reached the car. She climbed into the back seat and buckled herself in with the careful efficiency of someone who has been practicing. I sat in the passenger seat and stared through the windshield at a row of decorative shrubs that had been pruned into perfect spheres. Daniel started the engine. He put his hand over mine on the center console and held it without squeezing. Just contact, just there. She knew, I said. My voice came out strange and flat. Brooke knew weeks ago that Sophie wasn't going to be the flower girl, and nobody called. Nobody texted. They just let her practice and let her be excited and let her pick out that dress, and I stopped, breathed. They let her ask me 4 times on the drive over if she looked beautiful, I said. I know, Daniel said. In the back seat, Sophie said, very quietly, Mommy, does Aunt Brooke not like me? I turned around. Sophie was looking out the window at the parking lot, her white bow still enormous and perfect at her waist, her hands folded in her lap with a kind of composure that no 6-year-old should need to have. Aunt Brooke doesn't know you yet, I said. This has nothing to do with who you are. That's the truest thing I know. Sophie absorbed this. I practice the walk every day, she said. Not accusing, not complaining, just stating the fact of it the way you state the weather. Something in my chest cracked in a way I was not going to let her see. You were going to be so wonderful, I said. She nodded once, accepting this. Then, after a moment, with the efficient pivot of someone deciding to close a door rather than stand in front of it, she said, Can we get ice cream? The kind with the waffle cone? Daniel made a sound that was almost a laugh. Absolutely yes. He pulled out of the parking space and turned toward the exit, and I stared at the dashboard and told myself I was fine and I was not fine, and I knew the difference. But I also knew how to carry one of them while presenting the other, and I had been doing that for years. So I did it now. I kept my face forward and I breathed and I was holding it together, and that was enough. We were 11 minutes down the road when my phone rang. My father's name on the screen. I almost sent it to voicemail. My father had been at the Hargrove Inn. He had been there this whole time, somewhere in that warm piano music gardenia-scented room, and he had not come to the lobby. He had not sent a text. He had not called until now, 11 minutes after the fact, and whatever he was calling to say, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. Daniel glanced at the screen, then at me. He didn't say anything. He never told me what to do. I answered, Rachel. My father's voice was not what I expected, not apologetic, not the measured, non-committal tone he had been using for as long as I could remember. Whenever he was carefully not taking sides, he sounded tight, like something he'd been holding for a long time had finally broken its housing. Where are you? On the way home? How far? 15 minutes, maybe. Dad, if you're calling to explain. I'm not calling to explain. I'm calling to ask you to turn around. A pause. Then, more quietly, with a weight underneath it I hadn't heard from him in years. Please, turn around and come back. This isn't about Ethan's party. Just trust me. I looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at me. There was something in my father's voice. Not the words, but the quality of them. The way they were held. That made me understand, without being able to say, why that this was different from every other phone call he had made in the last 10 years. When the subject was my place in this family. We're coming back, I said. I ended the call. Turn around, I told Daniel. He found a spot to make a U-turn without asking me a single question, because that was the kind of man Daniel was, and we drove back the way we came. My father was standing outside the Hargrove Inn when we pulled up. Not inside, not near the door. He was at the bottom of the steps in the cold evening air without a jacket, standing at the edge of the path the way someone stands when they have been watching for headlights. He looked older than he usually did, not in a frightening way, in the way people look when they have stopped managing how they appear and are just standing in what they actually are. I got out of the car. Daniel followed. Sophie scrambled out from the back seat and ran directly to my father, the way she always did, without hesitation, because she had never had any reason to hesitate with him. And he caught her and lifted her and held her in a way that closed my throat. "Hey there, butterfly." He set it into her hair. He held her for a moment and then set her down and smoothed her bow, which had gone slightly sideways in the car. "There. Perfect." He looked at Daniel. "Would you mind taking this one to see the garden around back? There's a fountain with koi. I think there might be 7 or 8 of them." Sophie inhaled sharply. "Big ones? Some of them?" He nodded very seriously. Daniel looked at me, a look that said, "I'm right here," and took Sophie's hand, and they walked around the side of the building and disappeared. My father and I stood on the stone path in the evening air. The piano drifted out faintly from inside. Someone laughed behind the tall windows, bright and careless. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Dad, let me finish." He looked at me directly, and his eyes were doing something I didn't see in them often, something uncomfortable and deliberate. "I was standing near the bar when your mother went to the lobby. I heard what she said to you. I heard the whole thing. I waited. I stayed where I was. I told myself it wasn't the right moment to cause a scene, that tonight was important to Ethan, that I would speak to your mother after, privately." He paused. "That's what I've been telling myself for a long time, that I'll address it privately. Later, when the moment is better." "Okay," I said. The word came out more careful than I intended. "There's no better moment," he said. "I understand that now. I've been protecting peace in this family at the cost of fairness to you, and I've been telling myself those two things weren't in conflict. They are. They've always been." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and took out his phone. He turned the screen toward me. It was a text message. From Ethan, sent at 2:17 that afternoon, while I had been helping Sophie decide between the lavender dress and a pink one, while I had been curling her hair and promising her that yes, Uncle Ethan would notice, yes, Aunt Brooke would love her, yes, tonight was going to be wonderful. The message was to my mother. My father had been copied on it, or forwarded it. I would figure out which later. What mattered was the words. "Mom, can you handle the Rachel thing before tonight? Brooke's already stressed and she doesn't want any awkwardness. Just tell her it's a smaller guest list, or that Sophie's too young for a late event, or whatever makes sense. I don't care what you say, just make sure they don't show up. Rachel always finds a way to make things about her, and I can't deal with it tonight. Also tell her about the flower girl thing because Brooke already told Penelope and it would be weird to have 2 kids expecting it. I read it twice. The Rachel thing. I was a thing to be handled. My daughter's feelings, my drive across town, the dress Sophie had called her princess party dress. All of it was logistical interference to be neutralized before dinner. "He planned this," I said. "Yes. This morning. He decided this morning and sent Mom to manage it." "Yes. And your mother, as she has done for most of your brother's adult life, did exactly what he asked, without question or pushback of any kind." The piano kept playing inside. A passing car on the road behind us pulled a wash of headlights across the pavement and was gone. "I need you to come inside with me," my father said. "Dad, I don't think—" "Not for Ethan. Not for Brooke. Not for your mother." He looked at me with the expression of someone who has made a decision after a very long time of not making it, and the steadiness of it was almost frightening. "I need you to come inside because there are things that should be said in front of the people who should hear them. I have been handling things privately with this family for 15 years, and the result is that my daughter and my granddaughter just got turned away from a party at the door, and I'm not willing to let tonight be another thing I address later." I thought about Sophie folding her hands in her lap in the back seat. I practiced the walk every day, just stating it, not asking anything of me, just putting it down. "Okay," I said. He nodded and led me up the stone steps and pushed open the heavy door. The warmth hit me immediately. The gardenias and the candlelight and the sound of 30 people mid-conversation. A few heads turned near the entrance. A few people smiled in the vague, reflexive way of party guests acknowledging an arrival. My mother appeared from the left side of the room before I had taken 3 steps, and the sequence of expressions that crossed her face, surprise, then alarm, then the rapid collection of composure, happened in less than 2 seconds. She was very good at it. She had had a lot of practice. "Robert," she said to my father, her voice clipped and low. What are you doing? Tonight is not the time for. I'd like a moment, my father said. Not loud, not theatrical. Clearly in the voice of someone who is not making a request. The conversations nearest to us went quiet first, then the conversations beyond those, in the way of parties. Silence traveling outward from a center point until it reached the piano player, who faltered on a chord and stopped. In the hush, I became aware of my own breathing. Ethan appeared from the archway at the far end of the room. He was in a gray suit with his dark hair combed back, and he looked the way he had always looked at family gatherings, easy, comfortable, in possession of the room. Brooke was beside him, her hand through his arm, a beautiful woman in a champagne-colored dress with an expression that was trying to stay pleasant and not quite managing it. Ethan looked at me. Something complicated moved through his face. Then he looked at our father. Dad, what's going on? Why is she's here, my father said. Because she's my daughter. Because she drove 40 minutes tonight with her husband and her 6-year-old child in a party dress. Because she belongs in any room in which this family is gathered. Because I should have opened the door myself 2 hours ago. Ethan's jaw tightened. This isn't the place. I know you believe that. I've been telling myself the same thing for a very long time. My father spoke evenly, without performance, each sentence placed down like something being deliberately set on a table. I know about the text you sent your mother this afternoon. I know you asked her to handle the Rachel thing. I know that's exactly what she did. Brooke made a small sound. A few people near us shifted. My mother said, Robert, please. I've been quiet about this pattern in our family for too long. My father continued, I want to be direct, because I think directness is what we have most been lacking. He paused, and in the pause, the room held itself very still. I had a conversation with my attorney last week. I want everyone present to understand that the decisions I made some years ago about how my estate was to be divided are in the process of being revised, effective immediately. The silence changed texture. My mother's face went through something I couldn't fully read. Ethan's expression stiffened. You can't be serious, Ethan said. The secondary property on Gilmore Lake, which I have allowed to be used and discussed and informally understood as your inheritance for the last several years, will not be passing to you in the current arrangement? My father's voice was entirely even. That evenness, I understood standing there, was the hardest thing he had ever done. I love you. That has not changed. But love does not mean exemption from what you earn. I have been confusing those two things for longer than I should have. Brooke said something to Ethan under her breath. Ethan looked at her, then back at our father, and something in his expression shifted. Not into remorse, not yet, but into the recalibration of a person who has suddenly discovered that the ground beneath a certain assumption is not as solid as they believed. My mother turned to me with an expression that had moved past composure entirely. Are you happy now? She said. It was not a gentle question. I didn't answer her. I was looking at my father. He turned to me, and his eyes had that quality again. The older and heavier quality I had noticed in the parking lot, the look of someone who has been carrying something uphill for a very long time and has finally, at the top, set it down. I am sorry for tonight, he said. I am sorry for the other nights before this one. I'm sorry Sophie put on her dress and practiced her walk for a wedding that her own grandmother and uncle had already decided she wouldn't be part of. He paused. I am sorry I did not come to that lobby. I had been holding myself together since the parking lot with the deliberate, practiced grip of someone who has spent years learning how to hold themselves together in front of the wrong people. I did not let go entirely. I want to be clear about that. I was not the spectacle tonight. But my eyes did what eyes do when pressure that has been held behind them for a long time is suddenly given permission to go somewhere, and I stopped trying to prevent it. Thank you, I said. It was the only thing I had. It was also, I understood in that moment exactly enough. My mother said something sharp about timing and about everything she had done for this family and about the years she had sacrificed. Ethan took Brooke by the arm and said something to her quietly. Several guests near the edges of the room began the careful, focused examination of their drinks that people undertake when they have witnessed something they do not know how to address. I looked at my father. Where's the garden? Down the hall on your right, he said. There's a door at the end. I went. The garden behind the Hargrove Inn was dark and cool and smelled like wet stone and late-season grass, String lights had been threaded through the hedges along the paths, casting a low yellow glow across the gravel. The koi fountain was in the center, lit from beneath, the fish moving slow and orange just below the surface. Daniel was crouched at the edge of the fountain with Sophie beside him, her face about 4 inches from the water, watching with the absolute concentrated focus of someone observing something that has not yet decided whether to trust her. I walked across the gravel and Daniel heard me coming and stood. He looked at my face in the string-light glow and read whatever was written there without asking me to translate it. "Okay," he said. "My dad changed the estate arrangement in front of everyone." A beat. In front of everyone? Everyone. Daniel exhaled slowly, once, through his nose. He put his arm around my shoulders and I leaned into him and we stood there watching Sophie. "He apologized," I said, "for all of it, for not coming to the lobby earlier, for the pattern, for a long time of staying quiet." "Good," Daniel said simply. From inside, faintly, I could hear the elevated sound of my mother's voice, and then Ethan's, and then a long silence, and then what sounded like a door. Sophie stood up very suddenly from the fountain's edge. She turned around with her hands cupped together, held out toward me, her face blazing with triumph. "Mommy," she said, "I caught one." Her hands were empty. The fish were still in the water, but her face said otherwise, and I understood that what she had caught was something invisible, and hers alone, something she had held for exactly as long as she needed to. "Did it wiggle?" I said. "So much," she said with great dignity. "I let it go on purpose, because it seemed like it wanted to be back with the others." Daniel made a sound that was a real laugh, low and warm. The kind he only made when something caught him off guard in the best possible way. I pulled Sophie in close and pressed my face against the top of her head, into the hair I had spent 20 minutes curling that afternoon, into the scent of her detangler and the lavender dress she had called her princess party dress and had worn to a party she hadn't been allowed inside. "Mommy," she said, her voice muffled, against my shoulder. "Can we still get ice cream? I think I've done enough fish." "Yes," I said, "let's get ice cream." We said goodbye to my father on the stone steps. He held Sophie and told her that the koi fish was very lucky to have been caught and released by someone so careful. She accepted this as fact. He shook Daniel's hand and held it for a moment longer than a handshake requires. He looked at me with those new eyes, the honest ones, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being seen by him as something other than a situation that could wait. "I'll call you this week," he said. "I'll pick up," I said. Ethan did not come to the door. We found an ice cream place 20 minutes away, the kind with picnic tables outside, and a handwritten chalkboard menu, and a teenager working the window who wore an enormous apron and moved like someone who genuinely loved their job. Sophie got 2 scoops and a waffle cone, strawberry cheesecake, and cookies and cream. Daniel got mint chip. I got a single scoop of salted caramel, because I hadn't ordered what I actually wanted in front of other people for so long that it took me a moment to remember how. We sat at a picnic table under a string of bare bulbs, and Sophie ate her ice cream with methodical joy, working around the cone in a perfect spiral that she had apparently developed a philosophy about. Daniel's knee was warm against mine under the table. A family at the next table over had a toddler who kept dropping his spoon and laughing about it like it was the funniest thing that had ever happened. The evening was cool and smelled like grass and sugar. I thought about the Hargrove Inn, the piano and the gardenias and my brother in his gray suit. I thought about my mother's face when my father spoke. I thought about being 11 minutes down the road when the phone rang, already calculating how to explain it to Sophie in a way she could carry without being burdened by it. I did not feel triumphant. What I felt was quieter than that and more permanent. Like something that had been slightly wrong about the angle of things for a long time had been corrected. Not dramatically, but actually. And now, things would sit differently. My father called on Thursday as he said he would. He told me the attorney meeting had been in the works for almost a month before the party, that it had not been a reaction to one night, but the conclusion of a longer reckoning with things he had known and not acted on. The Gilmore Lake property was being returned to the full estate, to be divided equally. He also told me that my grandmother's ring, a simple oval sapphire that I had been told was lost during their move to the new house 4 years ago, had not been lost. My mother had given it to Ethan to hold for Brooke. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the grocery store and held the phone and did not say anything for a moment. When did you find out? I asked. 2 months ago, he said. That was the beginning of the attorney conversation. I appreciated his honesty. I also felt the full, clean weight of it. Daniel and I drove to see my father alone 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon when Sophie was at her best friend's house and the weather was clear and cold. We sat on the back patio of his house with coffee, and he told me things he hadn't told me before, about the years I had been navigating everything on my own, and the ways that self-sufficiency had been used as a reason not to offer help, about the times he had seen and said nothing, about how staying quiet had felt, each time, like the reasonable thing, and how it had accumulated into something unreasonable without him fully tracking the sum. He didn't perform the apology. He just described what happened and let me respond however I needed to when I got angry. And I did. Sitting on that patio in the cold sun, I let myself get genuinely angry in a way I had not let myself do in front of my family since I was old enough to understand that being angry loudly was the same as being wrong. He didn't smooth it over. He didn't redirect. He sat with it. That, I think, was what I had needed longest and been given least. The ring arrived by mail 5 weeks after that. A small box wrapped in brown paper, my name written by hand on the front. No note inside, just the ring in its original velvet pouch, the one with the worn gold clasp that I remembered from my grandmother's jewelry box when I was small. I put it on a Tuesday morning before work. Nothing particular about the day, no occasion. It fit on my right hand, the way I had always imagined it would from looking at photographs of my grandmother wearing it at family gatherings in the 70s, her hands folded on a table somewhere, the sapphire catching light. Sophie came into the kitchen while I was making lunches. She stopped when she saw my hand. "Mommy, you have a fancy ring." "It was your great-grandmother's," I said. She came and stood beside me and looked at it very seriously. She touched the sapphire once with one finger, gently, the way she had touched the koi fountain at the Hargrove Inn, with that careful, respectful attention she gave to things she understood mattered. "It's blue," she said. "Your great-grandmother loved blue." Sophie nodded, filing this information somewhere important. Then she looked up. "Can I have the yogurt with the granola on top?" "Yes," I said. "Get it from the fridge. I'll open it." She ran to the fridge in her socks, and I watched her and turned back to the lunches, and my hand moved across the counter and the ring caught the morning light from the window and held it for a moment, small and blue and completely itself. Ethan texted me 6 weeks after the party. It was a long message, clearly written and rewritten. The kind of text that has the fingerprints of several drafts on it. It said things like, "I know the way I handled it was wrong, and I think I've been telling myself a story about the two of us for a long time that made it easier not to look at what I was actually doing, and I'm not asking you to be okay with it. I just needed you to know that I know." It was not a complete text. Several things that should have been in it were not. But it was real in a way I had not expected from him, and that counted for something I was still figuring out how to measure. I sat with it for 5 days. When I wrote back, I kept it short. I told him I appreciated him sending it. I told him I wasn't ready to return to the version of a relationship we'd had before, because that version had required me to pretend I wasn't noticing things I was noticing, and I was done pretending. I told him maybe something could be built eventually, but it would have to be built from the ground up, not patched over what had been there before. He wrote back, "That's fair. I'll wait as long as it takes. I don't know what that becomes. I genuinely don't. I know that the distance between us is real and was real before the party at the Hargrove Inn. The party just made it visible in a room full of people. In the way that certain kinds of light make things visible that have always been there, what I know is this. The night I stood outside that iron lantern doorway holding Sophie's hand while the piano played and the gardenias were overwhelming and the warmth of the room came through the glass and I was on the outside of all of it, I thought I was the one being left out. I thought I was standing at the edge of something I was not allowed to have. It took me a while to understand that what I was standing at the edge of was the end of the version of myself that would accept it quietly, that would drive home and cry in the parking lot of the grocery store and eventually return to normal because what was the alternative? Because keeping the peace was the thing I had always done. Because it was easier for everyone if I was fine. I was not fine that night. I do not believe I owed anyone fine. My father calls every Sunday now. He and Sophie have a standing conversation about the koi fish at the Hargrove Inn, which Sophie has given names and elaborate backstories to. He came to her school's winter concert and sat in the third row and filmed the entire thing on his phone at a slight angle and cried when she waved at him from the stage, and she did not let him forget this for the remainder of the evening, which he seemed to find deeply satisfying. Daniel, for the record, was right. He told me 2 years before any of this happened that I deserve better from my family. I heard it and set it aside in the way I set aside things that were true but not yet bearable. I don't set it aside things that were true but not yet bearable. I don't set it aside anymore. The ring lives on the right side of my vanity, on a small glass dish. Some mornings I wear it. Some mornings I don't. Both times I am aware it is there. Both times I am aware it is there. Both times I understand what it means that it came to me, that it was kept from me and then returned, that it fits exactly right, that it is mine, and it always should have been.